Okay. Welcome, listeners, to our first live show of Season 3 of Inspire Change with Gunter. I am Miranda Spigner-Sapone, executive producer of Inspire Change and the moderator of the show. Today, this very first special live show, we're discussing domestic violence and the areas of consent versus non-consent in sexual relationships, along with special guest Gunter's wife, Lorin Josephson, co-founder of the Making Good Men Great movement, as well as she's been a previous guest on the show during Gunter's Conversations with My Wife series. And then we have some very special guests, the filmmakers of the award-winning short film Strawberry Cake, Myrna Cabello and Ashley Weismantel. Myrna is an award-winning producer, director, writer, editor, actor, singer, songwriter, and visual artist based in New York City, originally from Austin, Texas. She is a first-generation Latina of Mexican descent and was named one of the top 100 influential Latinas by the Austin History Center. Her career began on stage and theater before transitioning to on camera after graduating with a degree of fine art from the University of Texas. She has hundreds of appearances in TV, film, commercials, and voice work, and recently as Guillermo's mom in What We Do in the Shadows, and the bilingual animated voice of Zobey for the Texas Department of Health, which had over 4 million views on YouTube. Her work in front of the camera led to the opportunity to produce and direct industrial documentaries for Texas Department of Health, as well as commercials. As a creator, she produced a multimedia musical including original songs for the famous Long Center in Austin, Texas, and music videos for her band. During quarantine, she created a variety show with her husband titled Myrna and the Bulldog in 3D, as well as the award-winning short Strawberry Cake. Ashley Weismantel is an actor, model, and voiceover artist and producer based in New York City, originally from Kanohi, Hawaii. Her spunk and quirkiness, coupled with passion for entertaining children, started her career on stage and landed her tours and children's educational shows across the country as well. Numerous commercials, films, and TV shows. One of her greatest loves is passing on the next generation her passion for literacy and the arts through storytelling, which she currently gets to do with a nonprofit in New York City. Her work on stage and in front of the camera led to writing, starring, and producing in her own children's theater show, and toured the Hawaiian Islands for 3 years in multiple winning short films and that had success in the festival circuits. Some of her recent bookings include a series called Couples Therapy, 3 national commercials, multiple voiceover spots, and the recurring animated voice of Helix in the series Galaxy Defenders. During the 2020 pandemic, she co-created the award-winning short film Strawberry Cake. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over everything to Gunter Swoboda, who will take over from here and start this discussion on domestic violence. The films, he'll be asking some questions, and we'll just have a really open, lively discussion. If you are on Clubhouse, listeners, you can go into the room. I'm not bringing people on stage yet, but I will have it open to listen, and feel free to log in, and then we'll take some questions at the end if there are any. So take it away, Gunter.
Great, thanks for that, Miranda. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming onto the show. The bios are just amazing. I mean, I already know what Lorin does, so, we've had that before. But I really appreciate it. Very, very pleased to have you guys on the show for lots of different reasons. And if we get some time, I want to sort of dig a little bit deeper than the sort of talked about topics, the focus of the topics, because I want to see about how we can tie that together with the whole notion of inspiring change. And, the whole idea, I think, is, especially, my interest is in raising boys, is how can we get to boys, in essence, to prevent, the sort of thing that we're really going to be focusing on, which is, the content for Strawberry Cake and, the whole issue about gender relationships. So really, really excited about this little discussion. So let me, when I first saw Strawberry Cake, I sat back and it was like, wow, okay. We in Australia don't have anything like that whole thing about strawberry cake. How do you get women to safely, contact authorities to get out of a domestic violence situation? So the first question that I had is, what in your backgrounds, Myrna and Ashley, prompted that exploration and how to put it out there, and what was the aim of this? Either one of you, go for it. Rush me.
So what was our aim for this? Well, I have been touched by domestic violence, and I also, just by chance, as an actor, when I first started, I was cast as a woman who was abused. So I've dealt through that. I've seen it. There's a lot in the Hispanic community, and we wanted to do something that was meaningful during this time. Besides just as actors being able to work our muscle, because the shutdown, we weren't able to go to class anymore, to audition or to do everything stopped. We all know that. And so Ashley and Marta and I went to class together, and so we kept in touch. We become great friends, and during that we were like, we need to keep working, we need to keep doing things. So what are we going to do? And so Ashley, I'll let you continue that, because it's a really cool story.
Yeah, so on social media there was kind of this trend starting around the beginning of the pandemic about safe words being used, and if you're ever in a situation and you need something, ask your friend for that strawberry cake recipe, and we'll know that you're reaching out for help. You're looking for someone to speak to. So it's something, I'm getting like chicken skin, because that's what we call it in Hawaii, when goosebumps. Is I reposted that because this is a topic very close to my heart, and remember, abuse comes in so many different forms, right? Physical, verbal, spiritual. There's so many forms, right? And so I think what this comes from a deeper place of my own personal situation that I went through, and so I've always advocated to be there for other women that are in those situations that don't have their voice to speak up. And so I reposted that right away on my social media account, and a woman reached out to me, and I just couldn't believe it, because I thought, oh my gosh, wow, no, like, this is really what some women need. They just need that little inlet to just be able to ask someone. And I think that's what, and then we started, as Marta, Myrna, and I, we all started discussing this, and I mean, it was just, talk about in such a despair time in the world, watching so much happening, the world shutting down, there were so many things happening behind closed doors that so many did not know. And that was, we were trying to bring light to what might be really happening behind that door, and you don't really know. And how can you know? We're all locked up in our houses, so
Also the topic of how, because we're all disconnected, even on a Zoom call where we think we know our friends and we think we know people, sometimes we don't catch those times when something's going on. We're so, it made us all get really self-involved, because we were, I don't know about you guys, but I all of a sudden, a lot of stuff started coming up for me about having to be locked down and everything. So it's like, even though we were trying to connect, sometimes we weren't. We were missing people that needed help. And
a lot of times our partners were standing in the room next to us. I mean, think about that. Like, we could be having a Zoom call, checking in with our girlfriends or our friends, but someone could be standing outside the door. So we had to monitor what words we could really patient.
Yeah, well, that came out very, very clearly in the film. This thing about, how to communicate, in a sense, in a private way, but in an open forum. And I think that's one of the things that makes it really, really hard. Lorin and I both, I'm not sure if you know, but we both have, a background in philosophy, but also, psychotherapy. We work in the mental health space. And one of the things that I was very conscious of very, very quickly from the time of the shutdown was that, firstly, there are going to be people who are going to be really, really vulnerable. That's going to be women and children in many respects. But the other issue was the increase of alcohol and drug use. And I mean, in my experience, and Lorin will back this up, I'm sure, is that frequently, alcohol is a precipitating factor or a strong component in situations of abuse. And we're not necessarily talking about physical abuse, but the whole gamut of it, because the alcohol and the drugs disinhibit people. So, it was interesting listening to the male voice, actually, and I'm going, yeah, he's been a dick, super dominating, controlling, and the sense of fear that you portrayed in that, I thought was really, really good. Really good.
Yeah, and I think that's where personal stories, and I love speaking out because I think so many don't, again, have that voice to speak out, or maybe they're still in that situation, they're not able to find their voice in that. But I would, like how you just said, find the fear, because so much of that fear is inward, and a lot of, women in particular who can't express it until they're in a safe space and able to express that or to share.
Yeah. Well, from experience, I can also say that even in a safe place, women often don't express. They'll do a sort of like, they'll identify with the aggressor. Oh, well, he's not that bad, I really pushed him to it. And there's this mythology that comes out of that space where you get a narrative that's got nothing to do with the reality of the circumstance.
Of course. I mean, I just keep relating back to my situation, but no one in my world at that time knew anything that was going on. I always had the happy face. No, there wasn't that, you couldn't clearly see what was really going on. And so you're right, even in a safe space, sometimes you don't really, really know what's happening,
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think that's one of the major problems, is that people are not only pretending everything's okay, they want to believe that it is. They want to believe this is normal and that it's okay, and they don't want to have to look at it as it truly is. And so it's really seductive, that idea of not speaking, We have a process here when women come to an emergency department for anything, or into a mental health sort of treatment process, they are asked about domestic violence. There's a format about asking them whether they are afraid of their partners, whether they have been, or their ex-partners, or whether they have been hit or abused in any way. And it's amazing how many people will just automatically say no, and you sort of wonder how many are still hiding, even though they're given that opportunity to say something. Yeah.
And I think there might be a difference, and I mean, I haven't experienced that firsthand, but I do work with male professionals in this space about, if the person interviewing the woman is a male, is she going to actually really disclose or be more likely to hide it? Is it really necessary to have a female doing that interview? Now, some guys will go, well, that's sort of discriminating. And I go, well, I don't necessarily think, and this is where part of the title for the sort of movement comes from, is making good men great. I don't think we're in a space yet where there is that level of collaboration between genders, especially in sensitive areas like that. As men, we need to still work on that.
I was actually very interested in finding a male psychologist during that time, because
right.
I almost wanted to find, almost to figure out the male brain, right? Like I was like, well, why is this happening? Or like,
yeah.
So I actually thought it was something that was really helpful in my process.
Yeah, but I think some women are there sooner than others. I mean, I've had that experience as well. These days, my clinical work is 98% men, ranging from 13 to about 82. That was my oldest client recently. And he came for completely different reasons. But it's interesting because this is where I come back to what I was saying earlier. You know, we tend to look at treatment and intervention, crisis intervention. We're actually not spending a lot of time or money on effective, ways of educating, boys and girls around this issue. And until we do that, I think we're going to continue to be behind the eight ball. One of the things that scares me in this is we're not getting better. I came into the mental health space in the early 80s thinking that, we're evolving, as men and women, especially men, feminism was there. It was, the conversation was about equality and about respect. And I'm sitting back now going, and some of the stuff that I see from boys in private schools and some of the stuff that they share with me where I'm, it makes my toes curl. And some of them know it's wrong, but the peer group pressure that they experience to either not say anything or to participate, right? So, there's so many gaps that are still really wide in this whole space that, I'm sort of going, we've really got to work together to close the gaps. How are we going to do that? I mean, this, and I think the first thing is about that stuff about coded messages for safety. And I think that, again, I'm sitting there thinking about it. The other thought that I had at the time watching it is, it's such a shame that you can't express that to a man. Why aren't men stepping into this space more? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Why? I know.
If I had a friend that I knew was a bit sketchy about what he was doing, and most guys have an inkling, I know from experience, you'd call him like, you'd go, dude, you need to sort this out. This is not okay. It's not okay the way that you're treating your wife. It's not okay the way that you treat your kids. And it may only be in the form of emotional victimization or abuse. But there's a very short step between doing that and then getting physical.
Yes.
But most men in their groups are quiet. They don't speak out.
Well, and I think that was one of the biggest discouraging moments. I was just recalling as you were speaking on that, is I had reached out to a male person that was a mutual friend to have a sit down to say, hey, I want to say this in a safe space. I would like someone to be here present and recording this so that everything you hear me say will be, said in front of someone else, right? And then that expectation that was a male figure, that person was going to step up and say, so-and-so, that is not okay to be treating your wife that way. You should never touch your wife, or things like that. But I was let down, and I was so frustrated that I really wanted that to come from this person that we looked up to in our lives,
Yeah. That must have been so distressing.
Yeah, but like what you said, though, couldn't we have more of that? Like, can't we have more of that? Like, can we get to a place where we can all know that we can, there shouldn't have to be a choice of like, I can only trust to go to this woman in my life who I want to have those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to have a change in the culture of the way men think about their responsibilities to each other as well as to women. I think that there's a lot of men who are concerned about perhaps something they've seen amongst their male friendship group, but they're not sure that they have a right to say anything, that they should intrude because of that idea of privacy and not intruding in other people's lives. And so I think we need to find a way of giving them permission to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of factors involved in that. And, you know, I talk about patriarchy being based on 4 critical values: being territorial, being hierarchical and status conscious, being acquisitional, and women and children in the men's space traditionally have been acquisition. That we've been educated. It's like even when I talk to teenage boys, it's my girlfriend, and you know, you actually need to get them to think about, you know, are you talking in a possessive way or are you talking about a relational way? Right? If it's in a relational way, it's good. But if it's about you take possession of this person, and girls do it in return as well. I mean, you know, I get boys who, you know, they get 30, 40 text messages, you know, when they're out with their mates from their girlfriend about where are you, what are you doing, remember, don't speak to other girls, blah, blah, blah. And I have to explain to them that's stalking. You know, that's, you know, and it's emotionally abusive. And the boys go, oh, but she loves me. I go, no, but she's jealous. Oh, yeah, but jealousy is healthy. So that's another myth that comes into play, which comes back to that whole issue of ownership rather than about being in a relationship with an equal. And so we're getting an echo.
There is an echo of something going on. I'm not sure exactly.
So I
Continue, Gunter. I'll see if there's something.
Okay. And I think the other issue with men, apart from the sort of I can't step into someone else's territory, is that if you do, you're going to experience serious repercussions. You're going to get either teased or ostracized. And for a lot of men in that masculine space, that's almost worse than anything else.
We see
It's
that.
not. Go on, sorry.
I apologize. We see that a lot in films too, where that happens. So when you talk about, it's not just what's coming from the home, like what's being passed on, because you know that it's very difficult to break that cycle when you have a family that, you know, someone that comes from an abusive family, and then you can continue that cycle, which is why I tried to educate myself and read as many books as I possibly could to try to figure it out. But you not only get it there, you know, there's also the films that we're seeing. So that was part of the reason of trying to shed a light and have a space for this to be out there so that people can think. And, you know, the movie industry is such a huge influence. And even a small film, you know, remember they used to have those after school specials? Where they
oh my God, I remember those.
About things, you know, and
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Remember, like,
Yeah.
so it's almost like we have to influence that as well. Is the media, is the things that are being put out there, to have a space where people can learn. Maybe it's in the education, you know, where kids can have, you know, be educated. You get educated about sexual talk, so that's part of it too, you know. It's relationships, it's the sex talk, it's everything, and how you treat other human beings. And I think, but even with the Me Too movement, there's been a push to put it out there and to educate people, to educate these men. We're seeing it in the government, you know, guys that are being called on now. People are actually feeling safer to say something. So maybe the revolution that you were wanting, you know, but when you said when you first started, is pushing now. And this lockdown really made us, like, because now we rely on the media, you know, we rely on it so much. So how can we, you know, educate by putting these films out there, by also living in a way to say something, you know? And then the other thing that I have thought about a lot is that even when a child breaks the cycle or goes off or is getting educated, they're still going to go back into that home where the parents are not. So how can we reach the whole family, you know, to where it's not just about the children, but then the children can go back and educate their parents, or how, you know, and in the Hispanic culture, you know, that's very, you get into the things of the machismo and the dad roles. You're not going to tell me, unfortunately. I can only speak, for the Latinos since I was raised that way. But, how can we bring that back so that it's the kids the boys don't go back into that environment and lose what they're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And I'm going to chime in real quick. Gunter, the echo actually is coming on your end. I actually can't take it, so I don't know what happened, but you were fine, and then I'm not hearing it on anybody else. So I'll let you continue, and I'll just give you a cue if it clears.
Okay, not a problem. In terms of, different cultures, because we have a sort of spectrum of patriarchal cultures, and ironically, the Anglo-Saxon culture sees themselves as not being that patriarchal, but that's a smokescreen. Anglos tend to, point the finger at cultures like Latinos and Muslim cultures as being, these, really bad cultures about, how they treat women. But, as I said, we're under a smokescreen. We still have a very entrenched patriarchal approach to gender and, economics and politics. And, the fact that people are getting out it now is really good. But one of the things that's happened that I've really been concerned about is that there is a massive backlash. I get lots of men and lots of boys who basically, are trying to reassert their status as the primary male, as a primary gender. I mean, Tucker Carlson was talking on Fox News, and I mean, the fact that, this man is even on air is astonishing to me, but anyway, about, how women make the army weak. Well, that would never have applied in the Israeli army. You've been using women in all sorts of capacities and in combat situations right since the 50s. This backlash is, in my view, really, really, really dangerous, because people who are susceptible to this, who are afraid that women are going to displace them, and that I'm losing my place as a male in the culture, and I should be dominant, is they're getting fuel to reassert themselves in an aggressive way. And that's where I sort of go, we're really vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's where sort of this idea of women having some coded way of asking for help is really important, because we're at a period of time where a lot of women feel voiceless and powerless, and they are locked up behind closed doors, and there's very little way that they can just walk out. And in a lot of places, there's nowhere to walk to. So being able to ask for someone to come and help is in a way that's safe, but they're not immediately going to be shut down violently, is, I think, a really important message to get out there and to have as a protocol, in a community, and I really think that's the strawberry cake recipe is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and also, if you think about it, it's like taking that one shot. This is their one shot to get out.
Yeah.
Because if they don't, and the guy finds out.
Yep.
Yeah,
right. I mean, we've had several very significant tragedies here recently in Australia. One only just over a year ago, and she had made that move to leave, and of course then he tracked her down and killed her and the children. I mean, and that is the sort of thing that we want to prevent. We want to get people out long before it gets to that point.
I'm not sure what the picture is in the United States, but in Australia, we literally have one woman killed by an intimate partner essentially a week. And that statistic is like staggering.
Yeah.
And you get all sorts of excuses made about it, and there's all sorts of, there's still a lot of victim blaming and shaming going on in that context. And the problem that I continue to have is that men are not, as in a general sense, not that vocal. We wait for women to sort of make the first move and stand up and speak out. And then some of us as men will join in, because most of us as men are actually good men. We don't like this. We are ashamed in a way, but we're not proactive. We're not active within our male communities about doing something about it. Apart from the fact that as men we're generally not that good in maintaining good, close, intimate relationships with each other. I mean, we have a suicide rate in Australia which is abysmal. When after the suicide, everyone says, "Oh, I didn't know it was that bad." Did you ask?
Yeah. I'm going to chime in real quick, Gunter, because the echo is very slight. Lorin, when Lorin speaks, she is not echoing. So I don't know if that's causing, since you're in the same studio, because I can't fix it on my end. I just wanted to chime in on that, just in case it's because I know echoes can bother you, and so Lorin is not echoing. It's just you.
Just you, Donnie.
Okay, is that better?
You're still echoing, but Lorin isn't. So I don't know if y'all are able to.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to do with that. I'm not that tech savvy on this one.
Just continue on, and maybe it'll go away. It seemed like it just popped in. So just continue with the conversation. It doesn't seem to be. I'm talking to a couple people that are in the chat, and they only hear it on you and not everybody else. Okay. But go ahead and just continue, and we'll just work through it.
So,
I wanted to say, sorry.
Go on, Ashley.
I was just, I had a thought on what you were saying too, and it's so many cultures, religions, all of that really play a factor too into, I think, because you made a comment about men. I don't think it's correct that like men would be lumped in a certain, like not all men are the same, and I feel sad about saying that. Like, I mean, I feel sad about saying like not my situation or some woman who's in a really bad situation. No, not all men are like that. No, and that does make me really sad, because it shouldn't be that way. I mean, there is amazing men who would stand up for these, just like you're doing, like stand up for all of these causes and really supporting other men. And I just, it makes me sad to think that some, that the great, there shouldn't be all clumped together.
I agree, absolutely.
Right. And I read a really interesting article not long ago, and you know how a lot of people react in that sort of rejecting, defensive way. A lot of men will say, well, not all men are violent. And it's absolutely true. But the question we need to ask is, why are so many men violent? And that has to be a cultural process, a sociological process. It has to be the way that they are raised, think about themselves and others. And, so that's what we need to target, not the men, but the culture. Yeah. We have a particular issue at the moment that we're in discussion about the culture of teenage boys in very elite private schools in this country, and the misogynist ideas and beliefs that they have, and the way they treat the other teenage girls that they associate with, and even their female teachers. It's all sort of coming out and being exposed because of one very brave young lady from that elite area of schooling who actually opened up the discussion, having been abused by these boys. And it's fueled by, alcohol and peer group pressure and that chauvinistic, machismo thing is not only in the Spanish era, it's everywhere still, And so that's the discussions we need to be having. It's like a small Me Too moment just for Australian elite schools at the moment.
That's why I speak very clearly in Making Good Men Great about one of the first things men need to understand is the concept of patriarchy, because we don't use that term generally. That comes from feminism. At the moment, a lot of men hear patriarchy, they go, oh, it's those feminazis again, even when it comes from a male. But once you explain that to them, they start to go, yeah, well, actually that fits, that's true, but what alternative is there? And that's where I go, there is an alternative. So in that process, we go and deconstruct patriarchy, and we begin to start the foundation for a new masculine culture that's not based on those values. The problem is that those values are culturally ingrained in education, in health, in the economic system, in the political system. I mean, if we look at the proportion of women, representing their communities within politics, it's still not really equitable. There's still these pockets of boys' clubs. And I think that most men see it, but they don't know what to do about it. And then we have these pockets, where I'll talk about the backlash, where you get men moving towards ultra-conservative, patriarchal ideals as a defense process. And I think both of you are right in terms of we need to use the media in a way that can begin to deconstruct that whole process. Deconstruct that what we're living in is a culture that has a tendency to perpetuate the problem.
Yes, I'm really interested, Myrna, in what you were saying about film and how that perpetuates those roles and those ideas that are so sort of dangerous, really, for women. And because, as you said, that film is extraordinarily influential in the way people think, and what they take home from the theatre or the TV is really quite significant.
It is. And it's film can be so powerful in allowing people to step into somebody else's shoes and see something and feel something that they may have never thought about. And like you were saying, when you're having these backlashes, and sometimes you wonder, it's like, why is the backlash? Well, it's because this, and I just have this stance, and it's just this urge to protect and to stay ahead and to be, not be, in their terminology, annihilated. I don't want to be annihilated. This is all I know. It's that fear. But I think in the end, all of us really just want the same thing, And it's when you can break it down to where I think it all just comes down to being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, which is very difficult. As actors, it's something we're taught. Like it's we have to learn that because we have to portray so many people. And in doing so, sometimes we, and Ashley can attest to this, sometimes you open yourself up to feel things that you didn't necessarily, want to feel. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have so much compassion for this character, because even though she's being misunderstood, all the pain she has inside, because we're delving into that and really thinking about. And it's psychological too. It's like really trying to figure out this person and why they do the things they do. So until other people can open up to really feel that compassion and understand somebody else's plight, and what they go through. It's like once you do that, you're like, oh.
Here's the challenge, and that is the way that we as boys and men have been traditionally socialised. It does two things. One is it narrows our capacity to express ourselves emotionally, and the second bit, and this is exactly what you're talking about, Myrna, is that it reduces our capacity to empathise, because if you empathise, you're not going to behave badly, right? And you won't be destructively competitive, because you're going to go, oh, I don't want to be treated like that. Why should I treat somebody else like that? So that's the psychological consequence of a sort of, essentially an ideology like patriarchy. And that's where we need to really, really focus, I think, in the way that we raise boys and girls, just about how to enhance that. But also give kids, because I work with people who are hugely empathic, but their level of empathy actually gets them into trouble because they don't set boundaries, right? And often their empathy leads to rationalising why the other person's treating them badly, as opposed to going, you know what, I don't accept this. You know, and often communities go, oh, well, you know, you need to understand the other person. I mean, I've had, you know, people coming to see me where, you know, certainly in the early past where I was working with a lot of women, where they've gone to the minister of their church, telling them, sharing with them about how their husband was treating them, and the minister said, you need to forgive him, and you need to stay there. And it's like, are we kidding?
Yes, are we kidding?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think it was you actually who said there's such an interrelationship between religion and politics and the community factors involved, and the more that this is, there's going to be two things. One, the more we're going to discuss this, the more there are going to be some people who are going to go into backlash. But the more mainstream we're going to make it, the more people are going to start really thinking, especially I see that with boys. A lot of boys that I work with have been really sort of ticking this over. And I work with boys from, you know, those exclusive private schools, and some of them are exceptional. They understand this, but, you know, they're working in a sense still against the stream. Because if you're in the locker room and everyone's boasting about stuff and, you know, making derogatory jokes about women, it's a real risk when you're 16 to go, listen, guys, you're you know, to put it bluntly, you guys are talking shit. You need to stop. And unless they get the backing from a teacher, they hate to be the kid walking down the corridor if they're a boarder, because the rest of the group's going to sort him out. So let me ask you something. Along this line, do you guys have any other projects? Because actually, your interest is in kids, right?
Yeah, I've worked with children pretty much my whole career. I love this idea of, you know, I do a lot of like the educational theater, right? So
yeah,
my mind is always brewing on how to create content live or, you know, on film that can kind of portray some of these ideas that would create the change. I mean, truly, like I'm always thinking about a bigger purpose to the work I'm doing. And Myrna and I do this a lot. We collaborate a lot on like these, you know, thoughts and ideas, and I think that's how Strawberry Cake happened. It's always that step on trying to figure out how can we be a part of all of this, and what does that look like. But I believe it starts in the home, and it does start with the children, and especially in their younger ages. I work with 2 to 5 year olds, so it's really fun. They're really cute and fun.
Yes.
Yes. Well, Lorin and I have grandchildren in that age group. You know, we have a granddaughter who I would probably best describe as a shield maiden. No flies on that girl, you know, fearless, you know, stands up for herself, you know, and you know, it's great. It's because she sees that in the family.
I know for me that whenever I do a project or I get offered a project, I think a lot about what I'm putting out there.
Yes.
Like I'm very, it's very much in the forefront of my thinking. The show that I was doing with my husband, you know, the little skits and everything to make people laugh, but you have to also have a conscious of what that's going to do, you know, what are we saying? What are we bringing into the world when we write lyrics? What is this? I have a lot of songs that deal with abuse and women. I have a song called "You Only Call Me When You're Drunk," which was it's a blues song. It's funny, but it's actually a woman standing up for herself and saying, "You don't get to do that to me anymore."
Yeah.
I found my pride, I found my voice, no more. So in my music, I tend to really like go to that place because it's painful. It's you know it's painful, and I have another little short film that I started that has to do with the pandemic, and just it's interesting that we're bringing up men because is my brother listening? Because it's about the relationship between me and one of my brothers, and that relationship where I was always labeled you're too feely, you have to, you know, it's too much for me. It's like it's you're so dramatic, you know, it's that kind of thing where, and I explored my relationship with him in this little short about me trying to reach him in a way to make him understand, you know. To you this may seem, but is it maybe that you just can't? Is it me that's too dramatic, or is it you that just can't feel because it's too much for you? You know, so
it's, you know, as I said before, you know, how we're socialized makes us uncomfortable with spectrum of emotion. You know, when I start working with a lot of the boys, you know, when I say, you know, how are you, I get a binary, good or bad. That's about it. And it takes some work, and I know this sounds funny, but I have a chart with emojis on it. And a number of times I pull out the emoji chart and they go, okay, how about we try to broaden this out? And they look at me, they roll their eyes, and they go, okay. Right? But they're very quick at this point in time to identify when they're depressed, and they'll use that language, and they're not usually depressed. They're either feeling sad or frustrated, right? And they're also really quick to point out when they're anxious, right? Which in a lot of instances is actually not true. What they are is that they're apprehensive. But the sort of pathological language has really crept in. So everyone's startled and go, oh, he's depressed. No, he's not. He just hasn't quite understood how he's really feeling.
Right, and then, sorry, go ahead.
No, go, Ashley.
I'm thinking, I love my father. My father is, you know, been a huge part of my life. I mean, I've always had a very present father, but, you know, growing up in our home, it was the same idea, was that, you know, a male was a certain type of way. And so I grew up thinking, oh, a man wouldn't tell me how they're feeling today, or he's depressed, or he's feeling sick, right? Like us growing up in my home, it was like, oh yeah, no, I'm sick today, I don't feel good. But then we would never know when dad didn't feel well, right? And I've learned in my, you know, as I've been an adult, in my relationships that I've had, my romantic relationships, I'm like, how are you feeling? I want to know how you're feeling. Like, I want to know more than ever because of the culture I grew up in. And so I love that you used the emojis because, hey, that speaks to our younger generation too, right? We
absolutely
emojis.
And it's really interesting because when I often ask the boys, okay, what was what's your last text to your girlfriend? And they go, oh yeah, I did it this morning. And I say, any emojis in it? Oh yeah. And there'll be a heart there or a kiss. And I'll go, well, what's this? And you're not going to want me to say it, do you? And I'll go, yes, I want you to say it. I love you. And they'll, oh, well, I do say it to her, but it's sort of like spitting it out. And it's that capacity to sit comfortably in your space with what you're feeling and how to express that. But also the other part of it is actually being able to hold the space when their girlfriend or their partner or their wife shares with them how they're feeling. Because, again, one of the problems we get is that if she's feeling bad, I need to fix it. Even if it's not my fault, I need to fix it. And so we then get into the mansplaining and go, well, I think you should do X, Y, Z. And she's going, you're not paying any attention, really, are you? And we lie. We go, oh, yes, I am. Sagely spoken but ignorant. Because we're not actually listening. We're not actually there. And so part of the process to help men in that space is to get them to acknowledge and validate what the other person's feeling, and then ask what they need. And I get them to do that with other men as well. And interestingly enough, in both situations, it takes a bit of time because before that becomes a sort of like almost second nature.
This makes me think, Ashley. You said you work with 2 to 5-year-olds. Now, you will have noted, as we all have, that little children don't have any of these sorts of fears. They're very open emotionally, and all of the research and my personal experience is that kids are very loving towards each other. Male and female children do not have these boundaries set up. It happens later. So when you're thinking about the sorts of programs you could put into play for those kids, I guess one of the things would be to try and find a way through film and through art to encourage a continuation of that openness and that sort of bonding and relational approach that children have, rather than the separation.
Right, and we do social emotional learning so much in our programs, and I do a lot of songs that talk about feelings, and I have each of them do their symbols for how they're feeling that day, and I'm really always encouraging, whether you're feeling sad, are you feeling happy, are you feeling depressed, like we learn these words and these feelings, because I believe that's a huge part of this, is putting that into the process that early on in life, that it's okay, to start expressing those things. Yeah,
emotional intelligence, That's the other problem. So many boys are emotionally illiterate, aren't they?
Myrna?
Oh, I was just going to say that's the other thing, too. That's the other piece of the puzzle, the cutting out the arts in education.
Yes.
Not funding the arts, because the arts are a way to get in touch with your feelings and emotions.
Oh, yes. They're so important.
And they keep, not funding that. And I've heard so many stories, it's like, no money's going to go there. And it's like, because it's not important. It's not, but it's like it is. It's part of the whole education. It's important to feed our minds, but our soul too, and to learn how to get by, or not get by, but be in this world.
Yes, absolutely. It's a major problem all through the world, isn't it? That arts and literature are put on the sort of the end of the dollar spectrum. They're not important, math and science and STEM subjects. And when you think about the classical education that used to give us such incredibly educated people, it always included the arts, but that's been lost. That appreciation of the arts has been lost.
And what has sustained us?
Yes.
The puppet.
Absolutely.
We've discovered who are the essential
watching.
Have we not discovered who are essential in our lives? And the art world is so important.
And I agree. And there was this show I did maybe about 7 years ago, and it was a STEM show. It was science, technology, engineering, and math. And I won't ever forget the comments of the teachers approaching me after, saying, my goodness, I couldn't get this explained in class. So thank you for giving me this tool, because now my students understand why the heck I'm talking about STEM. The arts really do play such a huge...
Oh, absolutely.
But that also comes back to how, I know I'm a bit on the soapbox, but it's about what patriarchy teaches us. And patriarchy teaches us to think in either or. So at the moment, what's good, in essence, is this whole technological, career, professional orientation. But arts isn't in that space, so that's bad. You don't do that. It's really a waste of money. Where's it? I get students. I've got one boy who, wanted to become a writer, so he wanted to sign up for a literature degree at university. And his dad, who's a very successful lawyer, goes, "Well, what's that going to give you?" No support at all, really. Whereas I get other dads who go, "Mate, if it makes you happy, I don't care whether you're blowing tunes on the flute, But that's still not the norm, because the education system is geared to slot you into things like law, medicine, psychology has now become more and more acceptable because, there's a greater need for it. But, when I started, it was like, what? You're doing psychology? What? You're doing medicine? So it's this way of valuing things. And unfortunately, we can look economically at what's valued in our society. It's the traditional male jobs that are valued, as opposed to those careers and callings that have been seen to be female-oriented, like childcare. We need more men in childcare. We need more men in teaching. There's a lot of kids who have very little exposure to appropriate male figures. And if they can't have them at home, for sometimes really good reason, they need to have them somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Which sort of brings me to this whole idea of leadership, isn't it? It's what sort of leadership are we going to encourage? We need to get people to think about that. And unfortunately, there is this economic imperative that keeps reinforcing the traditional stuff. I mean, with some of the men's groups, I do an exercise called the man's box. And it's all, in the box are all those characteristics that is traditionally masculine, patriarchal. Being stoic, being strong, being hypersexual, being aggressive, right? And I go, okay, well, what's outside of that? And how do we balance this out? But because it's not an either or, there are certain situations. I'm very competitive with myself, but I could never get into just wanting to beat somebody else for beating them. That wasn't the point. It was about having fun with the sport or, playing tennis together and stuff like that. I'm very social in that regard. But, I mean, I've heard sports psychologists go, the only point you're in the game is to win.
Mm. And guys, we're having a quite lively conversation. Looking at some stats, we've got quite, I can't even count. There's a lot of people listening globally right now. And I have a question and a topic I wanted to bring in. It's a question. It's from an anonymous listener. So they're not really wanting to bring... they don't want to say who they are, but in terms of consent and violence and just with the changing times and what's going on, their question was that there's been some domestic violence among, we have, when it comes to genders, not just male and female, so to speak, but then there's the transgender community, and there's some problems that are going on and maybe not even being addressed because sometimes people think it's a taboo. And then, I'm not going to even get into the conversion therapy stuff, but in terms that they wanted to hear, Gunter, you guys talk a little bit about domestic violence in let's say a transgender relationship environment, whether it's a male or female with a transgender person or vice versa, and just to touch a little bit on that.
Okay. So the first thing to sort of address is that this is a cultural issue. It's not a biological issue. Okay, a lot of the stuff that we attribute to men and women has been traditionally seen as somehow biologically programmed. Jordan Peterson seems to make that point a lot, and I completely disagree with him. And in fact, if you think about how human beings have evolved, a lot of that traditional stuff about hierarchy and that we're territorial is a nonsense. Human beings have been nomadic since the year dot. I mean, that's how we got out of Africa. We're not, as a hunter-gatherer, territorial. That came with the agricultural revolution. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because all of us, men and women, have been socialized within this patriarchal framework. And it doesn't matter then which gender I assume, those attitudes come with it. Does that make sense?
It's sort of like gender is a socially constructed process. And so domestic violence is about power and control. So it would occur in whatever sort of relationships there are between people in their homes, whether they're fitting into the stereotypical gender ideas that feminism has been challenging for 200 years now, or whether they are in a very different sort of relationship where they are either two males, two females, transgender. It doesn't matter. It's about the relationships and one person being more aggressive, coercive, controlling of the other. So that sort of domestic violence is not just about between men and women. There are, sort of men tend to be more violent and aggressive in it, but there's women who are very controlling and manipulative and coercive of their male partners.
And some are also violent.
Yes. They're
so
just not likely to kill their partner.
So one of the issues that comes along with that is that there are some people who've experienced childhood trauma who have suppressed the anger and rage about that, who then project it onto their partners. And, rather than internalising, which at times tends to be a common one. And the other factor there too is that in some relationships, gay relationships and transgender relationships, there is also the propensity to use drugs and alcohol in a way that it's not healthy. Now, heterosexual people do that too. I mean, if I go broad-based in our community, for example, here where we live, we have a very, very, very high alcohol consumption. If I get 5 referrals for anxiety and depression, if I get 3 of those 5 to stop drinking and taking drugs, their clinical symptoms almost disappear. They start to sleep better, they're emotionally more regulated, they're more structured, they're clearer in their thinking. So the whole lifestyle thing becomes really, really important. So when I talk about this stuff in terms of domestic violence and sexual consent, and consent is blurred when we're intoxicated. And it goes both ways. And then when you add on to that the dominance and control in that situation for whatever reason, whether that's intrinsically, psychologically part of you, or whether it's both your intrinsic predisposition but also the cultural dominance of that, it becomes a volatile mix.
That's why I said in the beginning, is like domestic violence comes in all forms, right? Like
absolutely.
There's many forms. It can come from the male side, it can come from the female side, there's so many. It's a bigger picture, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But statistically speaking, men tend to weigh heavily in that. We tend to do that stuff more on a physical violence side than women, because I mean, let's face it. I'm probably twice the size of my wife, and you haven't seen me, but I'm 6'3" and I'm about 250 pounds, and so I'm like a blocker in a football team. So when I worked with men who were domestically violent, not one of them would ever think about tackling me. And it was really interesting because a lot of those guys actually never had a fight with a male, but they would attack their female partner. And it's that internal, because deep down they're afraid and they don't know how to express themselves, so that frustration overlays the capacity to regulate what they're feeling. And you add alcohol to that and it's like, we've got an explosion.
And then I think, specific to that question, in communities where people have had to really go through a lot of emotional trauma to be the person they wish to be the person they need to be, then, they've often been quite emotionally traumatized. And there's a lot of distress and anger. And in relationships in the wrong, it can become really quite difficult for people to control themselves. Especially, yes, if they're using intoxicants, but if they're under any sort of emotional strain. And in today's world with COVID, with people locked down, I don't think it matters whether people are, what gender people are. They're at risk if there are background traumas and stress that have left them vulnerable. to either being the one who is the perpetrator or being the victim of that,
Yeah. And I mean, that also includes financial stress. How many people have lost jobs, homes? I mean, both in the United States and in the UK, homelessness has really seriously increased. Why? Because we have an economic system that easily disadvantages people who are in the gig economy, right? You don't have any, superannuation, no health fund, nothing, and then suddenly, because of this thing called COVID, you're out of a job. What happens then? And so all of that comes into the mix.
It's all, it all goes back to also like just mental health and how we don't address that. All of that tied into when you don't know what to do with that anger, and all you've ever seen is your dad, or somebody in your family beat somebody, and they didn't do, and you saw the cycle, but you don't know how to deal with your emotions. When you have stress, what do I do when I have stress? Don't take it out on other people. You know what I mean? It's like learning these things, going back to the arts, going back to the whole, meditating and taking time and self-nurturing, things that we're not taught. And actually that's something huge that Ashley has been teaching me, is that self-nurturing, and like taking the time and like meditating and taking the block to just, breathe, be in the moment, just like don't let all those voices, get them out of there so that they don't infiltrate and cause more, physical damage.
That's right. And that's where the arts and where film and where, sort of songs and literature can all provide opportunities for us to teach that to people in a way that is not easy for them to reject. It's sort of they take it on board without having to sit there and accept sort of that they are learning anything. It's amazing the usefulness of literature in teaching people about human life, about how to deal with problems in human life. And the sadness of people not reading anymore is really problematic because they're not getting that. And film can do that as well, and that's something that your little film has actually provided a space for women and men and anybody watching it, whether they're transgender or whether they're, sort of living in that sort of husband-wife stereotypical sort of relationship. They can still see that there is this option where you can say something in a safe way and get some help.
And that's also relevant to the whole issue about sexual consent. Is, lots of boys get themselves into trouble by wanting to dominate at that point because they're not actually verbal enough often to, explore that. They feel awkward sort of going, are you okay with this? Because the programming in a sense that we get is you should be sexually aggressive. It's like, really? And that can go really astray.
Well,
especially, sorry?
Even in trust, like even in a relationship, this happens so much in relationships too. It can happen in, these situations with teenagers and all of that, but it can happen in safe, committed relationships. I mean, the word consent always is thought of, I feel like, in these dating kind of world, like the world of dating, right?
Yeah.
People don't talk about the word consent in marriages and in committed relationships because
Absolutely.
It's still just as important.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think a lot of people have forgotten that one of the gains of feminism was to have that articulated that just because people are in a relationship or married doesn't mean they have to consent to having sex with their partner, whether their partner demands it. And that's very much a part of that whole domestic violence process, isn't it? That, the respect for each other, which is eroded through dominance and control and coercion. Yeah.
And guys, as we're starting to we're in our final part of the hour here to wrap it up, but it's such a great discussion that we're able to have a little bit of time. I have a couple little questions here that I'm just going to interject. They're just kind of coming in. One of them is a couple people are asking, about strawberry cake, and they want to know, I know it's on the festival circuit, but where they can maybe see it or watch it, whether it's virtual or not. If you guys could tell us a little bit about that, where they could maybe see it, because there's a lot of interest here that want to learn a little bit more.
Well, absolutely. It is in the festival circuits, but it's also, we streamed it live on the webpage. So you can go, it's on our Facebook page. And actually, Ashley, if you want to see some things, I'm looking it up right now. I apologize, I didn't have that.
No,
it's
ready. Great. You know what brings it full circle is that I wasn't going to use the word, but we're using it now, so I'm using it. Facebook is where it all started, and it's where it all came together. Is we wanted to stream it there because that's where really where we where the idea kind of grew from, and that's So on our Facebook page we do that, and then different festivals right now.
The page is facebook.com/Strawberry Cake Movie NYC.
Okay.
And
I couldn't find it.
My.
Yeah, well, it was because I actually didn't use the thing the way that you described it instead.
I mean, he did watch it via the private link, but we want to know if there was a public link where people could watch it. And Myrna or Ashley, if you could put it in the chat comments, that URL, and then I will actually copy it over to our listeners after the show, so that way they can see it, just in case they didn't miss it on how to get there. So if you just put it in the chat, and then I'll just copy it over, that would be great.
No problem.
The other question is kind of not really on topic, but it is in a way. Our show is called Inspire Change, and I think it's Ronia. I'll just say her first name just for anonymous reasons. Had a question about, is it possible to inspire too much change? And maybe that's a good question, actually, because we are Inspired Change. It's about making the world better, and that's what our show is. But then you also hear the word change a lot, like in a political arena, or you hear it sometimes in a negative connotation. And I think that's maybe where she was asking that. And so I wanted to bring that to the table as well from one of our listeners.
Okay. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Gunter, please.
That is actually a very, very good question, because I deal a lot with what I call change fatigue, especially within the context of organisations where they have this rolling restructure, resizing, people coming and going, and different expectations about performance, about relationships and so on. So yes, people can burn out from, attempting too much change. There's a personal thing with that too, where I go, one of the things that I feel is very present in our society at the moment is that individually a lot of us don't feel good enough. And the emphasis on constantly making changes reinforces it. So we start to develop a sense of anxiety. And my thing about change is the first cab off the rank is I need to look at myself and how do I want to be? Not because someone else wants me to be that way, but how do I want to be? What are my, values, and what's meaningful for me in my life, and, do I construct a purpose? And if that means, elevating my consciousness, i.e. becoming more emotionally expressive and more empathic, I'm on the right track. And in fact, for me, it's that simple. So I have a better relationship with myself and a better relationship with the people in it, because, physically wise, I'm going to live longer. It's actually true. We've got the statistics. So that's really important. Now, do I want to make a change in my community? Absolutely. If I see that someone's getting mugged, I'm not going to stand by. I'm going to call the cops. It's not just about me individually. It's about me in my community, in my relationships. And that always has a flow on, because it makes me understand the bigger picture a bit better and what might be useful and where to go with that. So that's how I see it. So yes, fundamentally we can get rushed into change and that can burn us out. But at the same time, we can't afford to stay stagnant either. So the metaphor that I always use, it's a bit like stand-up paddleboarding, right? So you're at the surf and you're actually standing on 2 feet on the surfboard and you actually look like you're standing still. But the reality is that your feet are doing this constantly and your whole body, every muscle in your body is adapting and keep fine-tuning the balance. So you're never static, you're in constant movement. And I think that's a really good metaphor to start looking at this whole process. Because if you start getting anxious, you need to pull back and reassess. That's how I see it.
And I think it's inspiring to change. Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Ashley.
Go on, Ashley.
To say with the inspired to change too, not only is it in our or within ourselves and community, but this picture of where our world is right now, like everyone stopping, pressing pause. We've been forced into a pause, and it's causing inner reflection. And I think that that's what's super important. Is sure we may not be going out and making this huge change directly right in front of us in the world, but we can also be making that change inward and saying, okay, maybe I need to rethink some of my own methods and thoughts that I've grown up with. And
yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've found helpful is to remind people that life is a journey. There is no end point. Kids, when they're growing up, they're sort of given this idea that there's some sort of end point when you're growing up, this is how you're going to be. And you talk to people and they think, well, this is how I am, I'm going to be like this forever. But no, life is this process by which you develop and change according to what happens to you and who you meet and what you do. That's how we grow as human beings, and it never stops until you're actually dead. So, change is something that is just normal for all of us to go through as we meet new circumstances and new people and new ideas. And it doesn't have to be massive. It can be just small. It could just be a small reflection on, how you want to, as Ashley said, how you want to be, in light of a new idea or a new perspective. It doesn't have to be massive, and it doesn't end. It's something that just keeps going. It's a journey. That's what I like here, a journey.
Well, we don't realize sometimes how much we really do inspire people every day with the things that we do or say, and how in groups of people, like one person says, okay, I'm moving, or they're doing something different, and it makes you reflect oh, they're moving. Where am I in my life? And where are they moving? And so it's and they're going off and pursuing their dreams. I can do that too, So it's we every day we do things that we don't realize other people, we influence people all the time.
That's right.
So just the little changes we do at being more mindful and learning.
5 minutes of breathing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the key is we're all connected, and just inspiring others and that need to, no matter how you connect, whether it's a Zoom chat or whatnot. One person, I was trying to kind of wonder on some of these questions are they're not worded like your typical questions. I think it's just because it's such a conversational topic. But one of them, it was going back to the safe words, for example, strawberry cake. One of the listeners, I believe it is, I think it was that Alicia? I think that's who was asking. It looks like they're calling from what region? I think somewhere in the Midwest. Is their question was, in typical, when there is a question of when without a pandemic going on, there is a question of when let's say you have the safe word, just like what is brought out in the movie, that's a hint to get some help, and some people they're afraid to call the police, and in a pandemic, I think they're wondering or maybe want a little insight on how that, because usually when there's not a pandemic, and there's sometimes there's ways to sneak out, and then a friend will come and maybe when the person's in another room, or they find a way to get them to a safe house or a community, but then some people were afraid to leave. And maybe you guys can talk a little bit about, I don't know if you know anybody that went through an experience similar or what they could be doing, because the pandemic is still going on, maybe not locked down in all areas, especially in America, but in some places where it's still very much locked down, like in Australia, in the UK. They kind of want to know maybe some of those tips, like once you give that safe word like strawberry cake, how, what are some ways to get that person to safety? And that was one of the questions that maybe if you had some tips that you guys could each one of you on this panel could give some advice on.
Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, for my own experiences, that again, I speak very openly about, being there for others and also in my own, I think of establishing a friendship, and again, it may be hard in the circumstances right now, but if you can get a phone call, if you can get some type of interaction with another human that you do trust, outside of maybe when your spouse has, gone to the restroom or gone out of the house for groceries, or, your significant other, whatever the situation you're put in right now, right, is creating that. 5 seconds. I was able to tell a very close friend of mine within 5 seconds, if I ever call you with this word, help me out. And I had called her with that word, and she understood right away. And it was a similar situation to where, with another friend or another person, was knowing that whenever there's that little thing, you just always call authorities. Like, there's no question. Send a police officer over. 100%. That is my first go-to, and I'll always say that, because if an officer is going to arrive at the home, that already has given myself or the person that is in danger a way out, because there is that extra body, there's that presence there.
Yeah, no, that's really completely agree. Myrna, what are your thoughts?
I think it's important, if you're in that situation, to not isolate, and to also know that there is no shame, or it doesn't say anything about you that you are in that situation.
Yeah.
There is no shame, and if you need help, there are a lot of resources. There's the hotlines, but if you can establish, first of all, not to isolate, and to even get the courage to talk about it with a friend if you can. I mean, it's such a delicate situation. I'm afraid to say anything because it's, I don't know people's situations. Someone could be in where if they say anything and this friend says the partner, anything could happen. You know what I mean? The partner could get more upset and it could lead to something. But I do know that there are resources out there. And if you could just, not self-isolate and at least know for yourself that you don't have to be in this.
And one person, just adding to that question, and I think one of our other listeners, she asked a question earlier about inspire change, and I thought I'd go back to her on that before we kind of talk more about that, is Ronia was asking, she's not real familiar with safe words, and I guess I'm trying to kind of make sure I understand exactly her question, and because I can't type into the text, because then you start hearing typing over the air. And so one of my questions, I think her question was, are there I would think there isn't rules around what kind of, it's like a password, I guess they're asking. Like you said, you use the term, if I say strawberry cake, then that means I need help, just like what Ashley brought out earlier in like what the film brings out. They're asking if it needs to be more like 7 characters. I guess if you're on a Zoom call with somebody, or maybe you're in a chat because you're trying to be quiet and maybe you don't want to say too much, maybe if there's a shorter way to say. I'm hoping I'm answering her question. Ronia, if you want to ask it again in a different way, if I'm answering that correctly, before I'll have the panel go ahead and talk. But if there's something if you want to know, like if you're in that situation and you want to know about typing, sometimes that's how people do it. They text somebody, especially because they might not be able to see it, or if they're on Facebook in a private chat and they say strawberry cake, or they don't even have time. Maybe they want to assemble. So I think maybe they only have 7 characters to say. So let's get some thoughts on that. And then we might have room for maybe 1 or 2 more questions before we wrap up.
I'm just going to say quickly, there was I apologize. I didn't.
No, go.
There was a video that actually Ashley had showed me about a woman that had her boyfriend had a gun, and she talked him into going to the vet for their dog. And at the vet's office, she slipped a note to the counter people and said, "My boyfriend has a gun, please help." So there doesn't have to be a code word. It can be whatever it needs to be in your situation. Strawberry cake happened to be the post that Ashley put that touched us. But I've heard of situations where people in restaurants, and us noticing too, where the waitress noticed and asked, "Are you okay in the bathroom?" And she was like, "I'm not." And so she helped her out. So it's a matter. It doesn't have. It can be a stranger,
Yeah, there was a
bathroom. Obviously being home is one situation, right? You're figuring like the social media thing. There's ways to reach out in phone calls, social media. But when you are out in public, if you can get out into that situation, yes, find the stranger in the bathroom, write a note wherever you can get to, have a horrible stomach ache, go to urgent care, get to a place where there's other humans around. So that, if you don't have an established word, that you can still get the help that you need.
Okay, I hope that answered your question, Ronia. If it isn't, feel free to type something in there, and we'll try to answer it the best we can. Like I said, there's really no rules as long as you find a way intuitively to come up with something, like the trip to the vet or whatnot, or in a restaurant or whatnot. It broke my heart hearing this when you talked about a restaurant case. I saw a news clipping about it was actually a domestic violence situation towards a child, and you guys might have heard about that, where I think it was somewhere in Florida, where this kid looked like he had scars and he looked like he was unhealthy, and the waitress was very concerned, or the manager or somebody, and they were I think they slipped some kind of note or something so the kid would see it, because when they went to go order the food, they were like basically not ordering for the kid. He was like, he wasn't allowed to order. I'm like, that was horrible. And I think he was all through, and the first time the kid didn't want to do anything, I think he was scared. And it was the stepfather that was the abusive one, and the mom was letting it happen. And there was another child too that wasn't abused, but it turned out they both got arrested for it, because this person went back, talked to their manager, and they called the authorities, and they took care of it. And that probably saved that child from further abuse, just by finally she gave him a cue to be like, and then the kid was like, "Yes, I need help." And that's how they were able to help that. And so just little things. Like I said, there's really no rules. But, it's a good question, because, some people don't know. Some people, they don't have that. Or maybe, they might not have that option. Maybe they want to know, is there another way to get out of it? If you can't get them to take you to urgent care, you can't get them to take you to a vet, trying to find a friend. What if they take their phones and all the electronics away? I think that was another question somebody asked. Is there any way to sometimes get around with that if you can't? I mean, sometimes you just feel stuck, or you got to wait till they pass out, I'll let you guys talk a little bit on that. But that was another question that kind of came in. It was just, what happens when it's almost, you feel like there's nothing to do?
Right, and this inspire. I'm just thinking this full circle picture right now. This is what truly should inspire the change, even within ourselves. Is that we're being more aware of our surroundings. Like our Zoom call on strawberry cake. We could have just been having drinks, and we all had our own situations going on. A loss of a child, pregnancy. There's so many of these things that we're all so stuck in our own world. we've lost track of like what's happening to our neighbor, what's happening to this person, and like it's just this whole sense of like community and how we can be more observant too, that there might be going on right next to you you are completely unaware of because you're in your phone, you're too so it's just becoming more aware, and it's not really just about ourselves. It's not about being selfish. It's about being more aware of humanity, humans, what's happening.
The neighbours and the people down the street. And yes, the fact that you haven't seen that person from that house for weeks, and why? I mean, how many people need to die in their homes with no one noticing for 3 months before we get that we need to actually notice what's going on around us?
Yeah, that's just being that's another way people can help, is just looking around. We were talking, and I was having a discussion yesterday with some people on just mental health in general, and like, let's say when someone passes away, there's always that question. People say, call me if you need anything. How many times do people call you? They don't.
Yeah.
And if you're just aware and just, sometimes they say the person you least expect when you're doing welfare checks on your friends during a pandemic or not, just ask a question like, maybe the person that you think is always all right and always happy-go-lucky and always fine, are they fine? Sometimes those are the ones that might not be. It could be just superficial. So that's another thing we can kind of mention. And people thinking, oh, thanks for asking. Be sincere if you're going to ask somebody something, and not just say, oh, call me if you need something, because most likely they're not going to call you.
In Australia, we've got a program which basically, and it's pitched at men, is to ask the question, are you okay? And when it first started, a lot of guys would do that, but they would stop at the first question, are you okay? Because everyone goes, yeah, I'm all right. But in more recent times, all we've been doing is encouraging to go that the are you okay is actually just the conversation starter. Because you need to go back and you go, well, are you really okay? My sense is that there's something happening, I don't know what it is, I'd really like it if you would open up to me, or if you need some support, I'm there. If you need professional help, we can point you in the right direction. But again, it is that, like, we're talking about, is that being connected as a community, about looking out for each other.
That was my favorite question during the pandemic, was that, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I went back and I thought about it, I was like, rarely has that been a question asked by many, like to me personally. So I went and, okay, how can I change just a little bit with the community around me and go, how are you doing? How are you doing? And then I wouldn't get an answer for a couple of days, and I'd be like, hey, so how is your school, or how's something? I'd go to specific until I got an answer, and then I would find out there was more layers below, and there really is more going on. Yeah.
There are also the domestic violence hotlines. For some reason, I'm a little concerned about the person that asked that question, because I'm wondering if they're asking for themselves or asking for a friend. But to get professional people involved is important too. If you want to find out more, the domestic violence hotline and places like that know how to help. Because even though we did this movie, I'm not a professional by any means, and I wouldn't, I don't have the information that someone who is a professional would have. So
yeah, and again, these are their steps, and like I said, I'm not sure exactly. One of these was a question. I think they were asking for a friend, but hopefully it's not themselves, and to let you know that you aren't alone. Like I said, it's not meant to be experts. The conversation and this discussion, these are tips to help and engage, and that you're not alone, and just any way that you can find, like I said, I don't really have a tracking to where I can go and find that person, but if like I said, I'm hoping that wasn't a question, but my thing is, while we're on the air, any tips that we can give these people, that's what's important. So that's going to leave me, we're in our final. We did go a little bit over our usual time, but it was such an engaging and important topic. And I will post the link so people can check out the Facebook page for Strawberry Cake and learn a little bit more and watch the film. And thank all of our listeners out there. This has been great. I'd like to kind of do one final, just a wrap up with everybody, like 30 seconds from each, starting with Gunter and then Lorin and then the rest of our panelists. You can kind of go from there. Just some final words to wrap up the show. And then also, if you guys can just kind of stay on the Zoom feed until I do my outro and we go off the air, and then we'll have a little chat shortly before we close that out. But go ahead, Gunter, in your final wrap up, and then we'll just kind of do a 20 to 30 second round robin with everybody.
Okay. Well, firstly, let me thank you, Ashley and Myrna. It's fantastic to have you on the show. As I said, it's about a meaningful conversation. Lorin, thank you too. I really enjoyed this one. I could probably, spend another couple of hours going through some stuff. As Lorin and I are writers as well, there's some ideas and I used to play in a band, and Myrna, when you were talking about music, if I had a shitty day, I'm a percussionist, so those drum hits used to get a real workout. So, I'd always come off them feeling $1 million. So that way of expressing and working through some personal stuff is often really, really useful. And that's the thing. I think, the first step in inspiring change is, firstly, how do I get inspired and how do I inspire myself and others? It's this real dynamic. It's a feedback loop. And, there's things here that, we've raised and that I've heard that, made me think about some stuff as well. So we just need to be open, and we need to be open to ourselves as well as others. And unfortunately, we're just that little bit too quick to judge in our culture, and judge in a negative way. So that's my take on that.
Lorin?
Well, I guess one of the things I'd like to just sort of say is that it's really important that people understand that they are not to blame for what happens to them, that it's the person doing it to them that's to blame, and that there's no shame in finding yourself in a situation where you need help to get out, and to, walk out that door, whether it's emotionally or in reality. You have a right to be safe and to walk out that door.
Myrna?
Boy, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that we all have the right to say no.
Yeah.
And we have the right to love ourselves and to choose something better for ourselves. I think it's also important, all of us, to I know now because of COVID, we're like so into our screens for everything. But try so hard, even through your face mask, every day, someone you see, say hello, because you don't know what they're going through. And sometimes just a hello, and, I'll tell people sometimes, I'm smiling under here. I hope you can tell.
A little goes a long way.
To try to connect with people, look in their eyes, take them in, have those moments, because I think that's how it's good for us, it's good for them. It'll help us connect more, be more aware of people around us, and so that we can help, notice something and maybe be the one to help somebody that really needs it at that moment.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Ashley?
Ooh, you guys are good. I thank you so much for having us on here and for letting us share our project with all of you. It's been really nice to be able to talk about it more and to be able to, hopefully, continue that inward journey for so many people, because it doesn't just happen overnight. And I hope that this just sparks more conversations. I hope people can openly have conversations, even if it's with themselves, that's fine too. Just questioning and making sure that, if you do have a certain set of beliefs, or you are in a situation that is unhealthy, how does that look to try something different? And I really loved what you said too, Myrna, about kind of the community aspect and like the smiling under your mask, because I feel like that's lost in a lot of ways right now. And I think just reaching out to people that, maybe have fallen off the radar this year,
Yeah.
or just really spreading that kindness around to others and really just loving on each other instead of aggression and hate, and just hopefully this will just keep sparking more conversations and more projects ahead for a lot of people.
I'm sorry, I just want to say real quick that little commercial, I don't know if you guys ever saw, where the person starts by opening the door for someone, and then they go, and so the other person goes, and they learn from that, so they open the door for someone, and they start treating each other kindly because one person started it.
Yeah.
Yes,
The ripple
Yeah.
effect.
absolutely.
Yeah. So,
All right, guys.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everybody. Our listeners, we had some great questions that come in, and I'm hoping for anybody that might be struggling with domestic violence, definitely, everybody just be more, there's always a way, somehow. You're not forgotten. And just being attentive to everybody. So I'm going to wrap up the show. You guys stay on the line for just a little bit, and then I'm going to wrap this out. So thank you, everybody, for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. This was our live show with some very special guests on the show. Lorin Josephson, co-founder of Making Good Men Great, and you can find more about that. If you want coaching sessions or tidbits, definitely log on to goodmengreat.com. You can also log on to gunterswoboda.com. All those links are on our show page. You can definitely go there to have more information. And if you want to have to learn more about getting coaching or mentor sessions, definitely reach out as well. If you have additional questions, you can email at miranda@noirtainment.com as well. And thank you again to Myrna Cabello and Ashley Weismantel for coming on and talking about strawberry cake and really bringing to light a subject that is very dear when it comes to dear as in meaning human connection on domestic violence and the topics of consent and non-consent when it comes to relationships and in that area. Once again, everybody, keep inspiring change, keep connecting, and we will see you every weekly on the regular episode shows. Wednesdays, you can catch us every day Wednesday when a new show drops for our 20-minute episodes with Gunter. And then we will announce special live shows as well. We're going to put a little music, and then we'll be out. Okay, I don't know if the music is cueing in correctly. Well, maybe it's not. All right. Thank you once again. If you have any questions, just email miranda@noirtainment.com. Check out goodmengreat.com and also gunterswoboda.com as well. Thank you. Keep inspiring change and finding a light in the darkness. Thank you.